It was an ordinary afternoon in a small grocery store in a quiet neighborhood. Shoppers moved through the aisles, some lost in thought, others chatting casually. The air was filled with the sounds of rustling shopping bags, the hum of overhead lights, and the occasional beep of a register. Near the produce section, an elderly woman, likely in her late 70s, adjusted her glasses as she reached for a bag of apples. She had an air of impatience, muttering under her breath. Her faded cardigan and neatly pinned silver hair gave her a modest, unassuming look. But what happened next was anything but. At the same time, a young black man named Jamal, casually dressed in a navy hoodie and jeans, approached the nearby oranges. He was balancing his basket in one hand, while scrolling through his phone with the other. His presence was unremarkable, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of the store, until the woman turned sharply and her expression changed. "You people don't belong here," she said, her voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. Jamal's fingers froze mid-text. Slowly, he looked up. The woman was staring directly at him, her lips pursed in disapproval. "Why don't you go back to Africa where you came from?" she added, her tone laced with something colder than mere irritation. A few shoppers stopped in their tracks. Some exchanged uncomfortable glances, while others quickly turned away, pretending not to have heard. The rhythm of the store faltered, and an awkward silence stretched over the produce aisle. Jamal's initial reaction was shock. His brow furrowed, and for a moment, it seemed as though he might respond immediately. But instead, he took a slow breath, his expression unreadable. He was weighing his response, calculating the right words, not out of fear, but out of purpose. The elderly woman stood her ground, her hands gripping the apples in her cart. She was unapologetic, her posture firm, as though she had just declared something irrefutable. A young employee stocking bananas nearby froze mid-motion, unsure whether to step in or stay out of it. A cashier craned her neck from behind the counter, sensing the shift in the store's energy. Jamal finally straightened his posture, shifting his basket to his other hand. When he spoke, his voice was calm but deliberate. "Ma'am," he said, his tone measured, "do you even realize what you just said?" The woman's eyes narrowed further. "I said what I said," she snapped, her voice rising. "This is my country. People like you don't belong here." Gasps echoed softly through the store. A young woman near the bread aisle covered her mouth, while an older man near the dairy section glanced around, uncertain of what to do. Yet, Jamal remained steady. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move closer. Instead, he let the silence stretch, allowing her words to fully settle in the ears of those around them. "All right," he said finally, nodding slightly, his calmness disarming. "Since you brought it up, let's talk about that." The store held its breath. The storm was coming, but it wasn't the kind anyone expected. Jamal set his basket down carefully, his movements precise. His calmness acted like gravity, pulling everyone's attention. Even those who had been pretending not to listen found themselves drawn in. "You said I don't belong here," he began, his voice unwavering. "But let me tell you something about where I come from." His words carried weight, each one chosen with intention. "My great-great-grandfather was born in Mississippi," he said, pausing just enough to let the words sink in. "He was a sharecropper, working land he didn't own, breaking his back so his kids might have a better life. His father? He was a slave, kidnapped, beaten, sold like property. And for what? To help build the very country you're standing in." The woman's lips tightened, but she said nothing. The crowd, however, was transfixed. A man near the frozen foods, who had been glancing at his phone, lowered it. An older couple whispered to each other but didn't look away. "My grandfather," Jamal continued, his voice gaining strength, "fought in World War II. He risked his life for a country that sent him overseas, only to treat him like dirt when he came back. He couldn't sit at the same counters, couldn't drink from the same fountains. But he stayed. You know why?" He let the question hang before answering it himself. "Because he believed in this country's promise, even when it didn't believe in him." A hush fell over the store. Even the distant hum of the refrigerators seemed quieter. "And my parents," he continued, his voice softening but never losing its intensity. They fought too, not with guns or fists, but by working every day, raising me to believe in kindness, respect, and hard work. My mother's a teacher. She spent her whole life helping kids, no matter what they look like. My father? He's a mechanic. The kind of man who'd stop on the side of the road to help someone like you if your car broke down. He let the words settle before delivering his final statement. So you're telling me I don't belong here? He said, shaking his head slightly, his voice carrying a quiet sadness now. Ma'am, I am as much a part of this country as you are. Maybe even more. Because my family paid the price for it in blood, sweat, and tears. The elderly woman's face flushed. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her apples. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. Jamal took a step back, his composure unshaken. I could have walked away, he said, addressing the entire crowd now. But what good would that do? Ignorance doesn't get better in silence. It's up to all of us to be better than this, to be better than words like those. The weight of his words lingered. The silence that followed was almost deafening. For a moment, no one moved. The elderly woman's face was a mix of emotions: anger, embarrassment, and something deeper. Something that looked almost like shame. She glanced around the crowd as if searching for an ally, but none came. Then, a middle-aged man with a baseball cap stepped forward. He's right, the man said, his voice breaking the quiet. We've got to be better than this. His words seemed to break a spell. An older woman near the frozen foods aisle nodded. My dad fought in that same war, she said softly. He always told me the only color that mattered was the red on the flag. The murmurs grew. A young cashier at the front called out, I've never seen anyone handle something like that with such grace. Thank you. The elderly woman now seemed smaller. She didn't apologize, but the fire in her eyes had dimmed. Her voice, when it finally came, was quieter. I didn't mean, she started, then stopped herself. Jamal gave her a small, almost sad smile. It's not about what you meant, he said gently. It's about how it came across. Words matter. Actions matter even more. A slow clap came from the deli counter, hesitant at first, but then others joined in. The sound swelled, not just for Jamal's words, but for the dignity it took to confront hate with truth. The elderly woman gripped her cart and turned toward the exit, her steps slower now. As she walked away, a woman placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. Thank you for saying what needed to be said. Jamal lifted his basket and exhaled. Sometimes, he said softly, it's not about winning. It's about making sure people hear the truth.